The first slap didn't land on her skin. It landed in the air sharp, humiliating, undeniable. "Get out of here!" The flight attendant's voice tore through the polished silence of first class like a siren. Every passenger froze mid-breath. Silver cutlery rattled on half-finished plates. She leaned in close, eyes blazing, hand pressed against the cheek of a woman who did not move. That woman, dark suit, quiet watch, posture as steady as iron, simply stared back, calm, composed, the kind of stillness that unnerved. Security was already stepping in, a tall man in Navy uniform, his hand hovering near the armrest as if preparing to drag her out. And still, she didn't flinch. She just rested one hand on her leather bag, her chin lifted half an inch higher, eyes locked on the attendant in front of her. Then she spoke, low, firm, unshaken. "I own this jet." The words didn't echo. They detonated. You could feel the shift ripple down the aisle, past the rows of tailored suits and pearl necklaces. Someone near the window gasped. Another phone, already raised, pressed record. A red light blinked. Passengers exchanged whispers. "Did she just say own?" The attendant scoffed, her fingers trembling, though her voice stayed harsh. "That seat isn't yours. That cabin isn't yours. You don't belong here." But the black woman didn't move. Her stillness was the answer. Her silence was louder than the insult. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The flight attendant's hand was still inches from her face, but her authority had already begun to crack. Passengers leaned in, wide-eyed, some muttering under their breath. A young man in the third row whispered, "She has a ticket. I saw it scan green." But he stayed quiet, half afraid of the uniform standing guard. The CEO's pulse didn't race. Not yet. This wasn't new. She remembered 20 years earlier, a different airport, a different face telling her the same thing. "You don't belong here." She had swallowed the insult then. She would not swallow it now. Her lips curved not into a smile, but into a warning. "You just made a mistake you can't undo." The camera light in the back row caught the scene. One woman shouting, another woman calm, and an entire cabin holding its breath. The storm had begun, and no one, not the flight attendant, not security, not the watching passengers, knew just how fast the sky above them was about to change. The cabin did not return to normal. It thickened like the air itself had turned heavy with doubt. The flight attendant pulled her hand back, but not her venom. "You think one ticket makes you somebody?" Her voice cracked, pitched higher than before, like even she didn't believe her own authority anymore. Security shifted his stance, broad shoulders blocking the aisle. His radio buzzed at his hip, a reminder of power borrowed, not earned. "Ma'am, you need to comply," he said flatly, "or we'll remove you." But she didn't move. Her eyes stayed forward, unblinking, like stone carved to wait out the storm. Around her, passengers shifted uneasily. Forks clinked against porcelain. A man in a charcoal suit cleared his throat but said nothing. In the third row, a young traveler in a hoodie lowered his phone just enough to whisper, "This isn't right." She scanned in. "I saw it." His friend tugged his sleeve, warning him to stay quiet. The red light on his camera still blinked. The CEO's calm wasn't silence. It was strategy. 20 years earlier, she'd been told she didn't belong in a hotel lobby she owned. 10 years earlier, a banker questioned collateral she'd overpaid 3 times. And now this. Different uniform, same dismissal. The attendant pressed harder. "This cabin is for VIPs, real clients, not people like you." She let the last words drip like acid, loud enough for the cabin to hear. A murmur rippled through first class. One passenger, a middle-aged woman with pearls, shifted her bag closer to her chest. Another snapped her laptop shut, discomfort flickering across her face. The CEO inhaled once, slow, steady. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply turned her gaze to the guard, voice soft but sharp enough to cut glass. "Touch me, and you'll regret it." For the first time, he hesitated. His hand lingered above her armrest, then froze. Something in her tone, too confident, too certain, made him falter. The attendant filled the silence with anger. "Don't listen to her. She doesn't belong here." Her eyes darted nervously toward the man with the recording phone. "Put that down or I'll have you removed too." But the young man didn't move. His lens stayed up. His whisper carried across the row. The internet is watching. The CEO's lips tightened, not into a smile, but into resolve. She had learned long ago truth didn't need volume, it needed patience. Her hand brushed the edge of her leather bag, fingertips grazing the phone inside. She didn't pull it out. Not yet. Timing mattered more than proof. And right now, the cabin was giving her what she wanted. Witnesses. Across the aisle, a businessman muttered under his breath, "This is a mistake." Another passenger nodded, eyes narrowing on the crew. The tide was shifting. Quietly, inevitably. The attendant sensed it too. Her voice rose again, sharp, desperate. "Sir, remove her now." She looked to security, seeking validation, clinging to authority that was slipping like water through her fingers. The guard swallowed, jaw tightening. But he didn't act. Not yet. Because the woman in the seat hadn't flinched once. And power, even hidden, was beginning to show. The storm was still building. But already the sky belonged to her. The silence cracked when another voice cut in, smooth, arrogant, practiced. "Is this really holding up first class?" A man in a silver-gray blazer stepped forward from the galley. His cufflinks caught the light as if even his accessories demanded attention. He glanced down at the CEO like she was misplaced luggage. "She's in the wrong seat. Give it to the Bennetts." Behind him, a couple emerged, their champagne glasses already half full. Richard and Laura Bennett. Platinum status members, the type who expected a cabin to bend around them. Richard smirked as if the seat was already his. The attendant straightened, relief flashing across her face now that backup had arrived. "Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. This seat belongs to you and your wife." Passengers stirred. Some looked away, others leaned closer. The young man with the phone muttered, "She paid for that seat. I saw the boarding pass." His friend tugged at his sleeve again, more nervous now. The CEO remained still. Her eyes shifted briefly, catching Richard's smug glance. He didn't flinch. He simply lifted his glass in mock toast. Security cleared his throat, uneasy. "Ma'am, please move to another cabin before this escalates." Her voice came low, measured, heavy with something that made his shoulders stiffen. It already has. The attendant crossed her arms, triumphant. "If you won't comply, we'll remove you. Simple as that." But nothing was simple anymore. The air was too thick with attention, too many phones angled toward the confrontation. In row 4, a woman whispered audibly, "This doesn't feel legal." The CEO exhaled slowly, her hands still folded neatly on her lap. "You called me nobody," she said softly. "But you've already proven the opposite. Look around. The whole cabin has stopped for me." The words lingered, unsettling in their precision. Laura Bennett forced a laugh. "Oh, please, don't dramatize. We just want our seats." The CEO turned her gaze toward her, unblinking. "Then why do you look afraid?" For the first time, Laura faltered, her hand tightening around her glass. The attendant seized the moment, raising her voice so the whole cabin could hear. "Security! Escort her out now! She's a fraud!" The guard hesitated again. His hand hovered, but his eyes betrayed doubt. He wasn't sure who held the real authority here anymore. And the passengers felt it too. A ripple moved through them, not sympathy yet, but suspicion. The balance was tilting. The CEO leaned back against the leather headrest, still calm, still silent. Her patience was deliberate, her restraint calculated. She knew what was coming. The storm wasn't at its peak. Not yet. But every word, every camera, every nervous glance was pushing it there toward a breaking point that no one on this plane could escape. The attendant's patience snapped. She leaned forward, her voice sharp enough to slice through the cabin. "This ticket is fake. She doesn't belong in first class. She's a fraud." The word hung in the air, poisonous, deliberate. Fraud. Passengers shifted in their seats, eyes darting between the woman in the leather chair and the uniformed crew. One man closed his laptop slowly, as though the scene in front of him mattered more than any meeting waiting on the ground. Security tightened his grip on the aisle rail. "Ma'am, stand up now." But still she didn't move. Her stillness spoke louder than protest. It was the stillness of someone who had heard this charge before, in different rooms, from different faces, all with the same conviction that she couldn't possibly belong. The attendant smirked, emboldened. "You see, she has nothing to say." Guilty silence. But then a voice cut through. Not loud, not theatrical, just steady. She scanned in. All eyes turned. Row 4. A young trainee flight attendant, uniform crisp, but posture unsure, had stepped forward. Her voice trembled but carried, "I watched it." Her boarding pass turned green. Twice. It was valid. The cabin jolted like a wire had been struck. Murmurs spread. Someone whispered, "Did she just confirm it?" Another passenger lifted their phone higher, camera flashing red in the corner of the frame. The senior attendant's eyes narrowed. "Mia, step back. This doesn't concern you." But Mia didn't step back. Her hands shook, yet her spine straightened. "It does, because lying about a ticket isn't policy. It's discrimination." The word landed like another slap this time, not against the CEO, but against the crew. Discrimination. The CEO's gaze shifted, just slightly, to the young woman. Their eyes met. No words passed between them, but the meaning was clear. The storm was gathering allies. Richard Bennett scoffed, swirling his champagne. "Are we really listening to a trainee now? This is ridiculous." His wife added quickly, "She's making trouble, that's all." But the doubt had already spread. A man 2 rows back muttered, "She looks calm to me. Doesn't seem like a scammer." Another nodded, recording under the table. The senior attendant snapped again, desperation rising. "Enough! I want her out now before this gets out of hand." Too late. It already had. The CEO finally moved. Not standing, not shouting, just adjusting her watch with deliberate calm. And when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of inevitability. "Every word you've said is being heard." The cabin stilled, phones glowed, and the balance of power shifted another inch. The guard finally stepped closer, one heavy boot echoing against the aisle. His hand hovered above her shoulder, fingers curling like he was about to claim authority with a single grip. "Ma'am," he said, voice flat, rehearsed, "stand up now." But she didn't. She adjusted her seatbelt strap instead, the gesture calm, deliberate, almost defiant. Her stillness unsettled him more than resistance ever could. The senior attendant pointed like a prosecutor. "You see? Non-compliance. She's refusing to follow orders. Get her out." Her words cracked across the cabin like a whip. Passengers jolted. Some pressed themselves deeper into leather seats. Others lifted their phones higher, red recording lights dotting the air like embers. From row 3, a middle-aged woman blurted, "She has every right to sit there." I watched her board. Her voice shook, but it carried. The attendant spun, glare sharp enough to silence most challengers. "Stay out of this, unless you want to be escorted off too." But the dam had cracked. Another voice joined in this time, a young father balancing a toddler on his lap. "You can't just throw someone out because you don't like how she looks." His words drew murmurs of agreement from across the aisle. The CEO hadn't moved. Her eyes flicked briefly to each voice, acknowledgement subtle but strong enough to steady them. The guard's radio crackled. "Status?" a voice demanded. He hesitated, thumb hovering above the button. His jaw tightened. For the first time, his authority seemed less like command and more like doubt. The Bennett couple fidgeted now, their earlier smugness thinning under the weight of so many cameras. Richard tried to laugh it off. "This is a misunderstanding. Let's not blow it out of proportion." But no one laughed with him. Mia, the trainee who had spoken earlier, took another step forward, her voice steadier this time. "If you remove her, you'll be removing someone with a valid ticket. That's the truth." The senior attendant's face flushed, rage rising. "Enough. You're finished, Mia. You'll never work another flight again." But the words rang hollow. Too many witnesses, too many phones, too much truth already leaking into the open air. The CEO finally spoke, her voice soft but resonant. "Do you hear them? They're not afraid anymore." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The silence that followed was louder than any command the crew had barked all night. The guard's hand lowered, just slightly, not surrender hesitation. He could feel the tide turning, the cabin no longer on his side, and somewhere deep in his gut, he realized. This wasn't just about one passenger. It was about power, and power had already shifted seats. The tension snapped like a cable under strain. The senior attendant lunged forward, snatching the boarding pass from the side pocket of the CEO's seat. The paper crumpled in her fist, and with a deliberate tear, she ripped it straight down the middle. Gasps exploded through the cabin. "That's illegal!" someone shouted from row 2. "She paid for that seat?" another added, phone lifted higher. The attendant's voice rose above the chaos, brittle but loud. "Fake documents. She forged it. That's all this island." The guard stiffened beside her, uneasy now, but still standing close. His orders were clear, but the ground beneath them was shifting fast. The CEO remained seated. Her eyes followed the shredded ticket. then returned slowly to the attendant's face. No outburst, no plea, just silence sharp enough to make the attendant falter mid-breath. From the rear, Mia spoke again, louder this time, defiance cutting through her nerves. "I watched it scan green. Twice. You just destroyed valid proof." The cabin erupted. A chorus of passengers, half whispers and half shouts, filled the air. One woman angled her phone directly toward the attendant's trembling hands. A man muttered, "This is going online right now." Richard Bennett tried to salvage the moment, stepping forward with a forced smile. "Everyone calm down. Clearly this seat was meant for us." He gestured toward his wife, who now looked pale under the weight of so many cameras. But the CEO finally moved. She adjusted her posture, slow and precise, her shoulders straightening as though she had carried this moment before. And when she spoke, her words cut through the noise. "You tore up my ticket, but you didn't erase my name." The cabin froze. Even the guard blinked, momentarily unsure of where his loyalty belonged. The attendant scoffed, but her voice shook. "Words mean nothing without proof." The CEO's gaze sharpened. "Proof doesn't disappear when you tear paper. It lingers in systems, in logs, in witnesses." She swept her eyes across the cabin, every passenger now part of that truth. Phones glowed like a constellation, recording every angle, every syllable. The weight of exposure pressed down heavier than any seatbelt. The guard's radio crackled again. "Status update." His thumb hovered, but he hesitated. Speaking now could mean choosing the wrong side of history. The CEO's lips tightened, not in anger but in resolve. "You think silence is weakness," she said evenly, "but silence is patience, and patience always runs out." The words settled like thunder rolling before the strike. The storm had broken, and the next move would decide everything. The cabin buzzed with disbelief, a hive of whispers and blinking cameras. The attendant still clutched the shredded ticket, breathing hard, her authority unraveling with every second of silence from the woman she had tried to erase. Then the CEO moved, slowly, deliberately. She reached into her leather bag, not frantic, not defensive, calm, intentional. Every eye followed her hand. The guard stiffened, ready to intervene, but froze when he saw what she pulled out. Not a weapon, a phone. She tapped once. The screen lit up, illuminating her face with a quiet confidence that no insult could dim. She lifted it to her ear. "Carla," she said, her voice smooth as glass. On the other end, a crisp tone answered immediately. "Yes, ma'am. Protocol standing by." Passengers exchanged confused glances. Who answers like that on the first ring? Who calls someone mid-flight and gets an instant response? The attendant scoffed, desperate to reclaim control. "Who are you calling? Your lawyer? That won't save you." But the CEO ignored her. Her eyes stayed on the guard as she spoke into the phone. "Engage Phase 1. Document everything from this moment. Timestamp, location, record all staff involved." Carla's reply came sharp and efficient. "Confirmed. Logs activated. Every second is being stored." Gasps rippled through the cabin. The man with the toddler whispered, "She's not bluffing." The guard's hand lowered fully now, uncertainty written across his face. The authority he thought he carried suddenly felt flimsy against the weight of systems bigger than him. The CEO continued, her voice still low, still calm. "Send the initial report to the board. Mark this incident as hostile conduct." "Board?" Passengers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Phones tilted closer. Someone muttered, "Did she just say board?" The attendant's smirk faltered, but she forced her voice higher. "This is ridiculous. No one here cares about your little performance. You're still leaving this cabin." But the CEO finally turned her gaze back to her, eyes steady, voice cool. "No, you're leaving something. A trail. Every word, every action, every lie, it's already preserved." The words landed heavy. Phones recorded. Witnesses leaned forward. Even Richard Bennett stopped mid-smirk, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. The attendant tried one last jab. "You can't intimidate us with phone calls." The CEO's reply was a whisper, but it carried like thunder. "I'm not intimidating you, I'm documenting you." The silence that followed was absolute, and in that silence, the power had already begun to change hands. The silence didn't last. It never does. Richard Bennett broke it first, his voice dripping with mockery. "Oh, come on. A phone call? That's your big defense? Pretending to be important doesn't make you important." A few passengers chuckled nervously, not because they believed him, but because tension always searches for a crack to escape through. The senior attendant seized on it instantly. "Exactly. She's bluffing. Everyone can see it." But the CEO didn't blink. Her phone lowered to her lap, still glowing, still connected. She rested her hands calmly, as though the seat beneath her wasn't under dispute, but under command. Then she spoke. Bluffing doesn't get someone patched into the board in 60 seconds. The words cut through the cabin like a blade. Several passengers stiffened. One man near the aisle whispered, "Board of what?" Another answered under his breath, "She said shareholders earlier, didn't she?" The guard's jaw flexed. He had heard enough corporate chain of command chatter to recognize the tone. This wasn't the language of passengers, this was the language of ownership. Mia, the trainee, stepped closer, her voice small but steady. She isn't lying, I've seen that name before. She hesitated, then added, "On our system, not as a passenger, higher." The attendant spun on her, fury boiling. "Stop this right now or you're finished." But the cabin had already shifted. Phones angled not just toward the CEO, but toward the crew, every trembling hand, every raised voice, every act of intimidation now caught forever. The CEO lifted her chin, gaze sweeping the room. "You wanted to erase me with torn paper, but my name isn't on paper. It's on contracts, charters, ledgers." Her voice slowed, each word weighted. "It's etched into the ownership of this fleet." Gasps rippled. Someone muttered, "Fleet?" Another whispered, "No way." Richard Bennett's smirk faltered. His wife tugged at his sleeve, eyes darting between the glowing phones and the woman who hadn't once raised her voice. The CEO leaned back, her tone colder now, final. "You don't have to believe me, but in 5 minutes, the system you depend on will." Carla's voice returned through the speaker, crisp, undeniable. Phase 1 complete. Ownership verification stamped and filed, protocol advancing. Every passenger heard it. Every phone caught it. And for the first time, it wasn't just disbelief that filled the cabin. It was fear. The cabin had gone from tense to trembling. The senior attendant's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her knuckles whitened around the shredded ticket, paper trembling in her fist. She tried to speak, but the words clung to her throat, heavy with the weight of exposure. The guard shifted back half a step, uncertainty plain on his face. His radio buzzed again. "Status?" This time he didn't answer. For the first time, his eyes flicked not to his superior, but to the woman in the seat, and he hesitated. Richard Bennett's smirk collapsed entirely. He slouched back, tugging at his collar, suddenly aware of how every phone in the cabin had captured his earlier arrogance. Laura Bennett crossed her arms tight, her champagne flute trembling, the sparkle of privilege dulled into something brittle and nervous. Passengers murmured openly now. "She owns the fleet?" One whispered. "That's what the system said." Another shook his head, but his voice betrayed awe. "She called it before it even showed. That's not a bluff." Mia stood taller than before, the glow of vindication washing out the fear. Her voice steadied firmer this time. "I saw the file. Her name is in the system. Executive override clearance." She looked directly at the attendant. "You lied. And now everyone knows." Phones swung toward the crew. Some passengers didn't even bother to hide their disgust anymore. A woman near the aisle raised her voice so the whole cabin could hear. "You humiliated her. On her own jet." The senior attendant snapped, desperation cracking through. "She's manipulating you. Don't believe this. She's nothing." But no one believed her anymore. The words fell flat, like an echo that didn't belong to the present moment. The CEO sat in silence, her stillness louder than any defense. She didn't need to argue. The crew was undoing itself with every desperate denial. The guard swallowed hard, then lowered his radio to his belt. When he finally spoke, his tone was subdued. "Ma'am, what do you want me to do?" The question alone flipped the cabin's power dynamic on its head. Richard Bennett muttered something inaudible, then leaned toward his wife. She shook her head quickly, whispering, "It's over. Don't say anything else." The passengers who had been recording exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and satisfaction. They knew they were witnessing not just a conflict, but a reckoning. The CEO finally broke her silence, her voice calm but cold. "What you see now is the cost of arrogance." They thought silence meant weakness. They forgot silence can also mean strategy. A ripple of agreement spread through the cabin, nods, hushed words, even a few claps. The balance had shifted completely. The crew looked smaller now, shaken, exposed. And the woman in the leather chair hadn't even stood up yet. The moment hung, heavy and breathless, until the CEO lifted the phone again. Her voice stayed steady, unhurried, precise. "Carla, advance protocol. Effective immediately terminate access for the current crew on Flight 227. Suspend all clearance. A pause. Then Carla's crisp reply filled the cabin, audible through the speaker. Confirmed. Crew access revoked. Credentials disabled. The guard's radio chirped once, then went silent. He looked down, confused, pressing buttons that no longer responded. His brows knit together as if the machine itself had betrayed him. The senior attendant blinked at her badge, clipped to her uniform. Its green light flickered once, then turned a dull, final red. She tapped it frantically against the cabin panel, but nothing unlocked. No response. Gasps rippled across the aisle. Phones zoomed closer. Passengers leaned forward, whispering like witnesses at an unfolding trial. Richard Bennett tried to laugh again, but it came out thin, broken. This is absurd. You can't just fire an entire crew mid-flight. The CEO's gaze cut to him, sharp enough to slice through the cabin air. Absurd, she repeated softly. Is tearing up a valid ticket. Is slapping a paying passenger. Is humiliating someone on her own aircraft. Her words gathered weight with each syllable. What I've done is justice. Laura's hand tightened around his arm. Richard, stop, she whispered. But too late, every camera had caught his stunned silence, his wife's plea, his collapse from arrogance to shame. Mia, the trainee, took a step closer to the CEO's seat, her voice shaking but certain. They don't have clearance anymore. You really did it. The CEO turned her head slightly, meeting her eyes. No, they did it. I only signed the receipt. The senior attendant dropped the shredded ticket pieces to the floor, her voice trembling. You can't just end careers with a phone call. The CEO's reply was ice cold. You ended your career when you tore that ticket. The call only made it official. The cabin erupted not in chaos, but in applause. Scattered at first, then building, passengers clapping, some cheering softly, others shaking their heads in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. The guard lowered his head, muttering, "What now?" But his question wasn't to her anymore. It was to himself. The CEO placed her phone down on the armrest, folded her hands, and leaned back into her seat. Calm again, silent again. Power not displayed with volume, but with finality. The crew had been stripped of authority in real time, in front of every witness, and the message was unmistakable. The cabin was no longer quiet. Applause echoed off the paneled walls, soft at first, then louder as passengers found courage in numbers. Some clapped cautiously, others with both hands, palms stinging with vindication. Phones caught it all, the sound of an entire cabin standing with the woman who had been dismissed minutes earlier. The guard slumped against the aisle wall, his badge still glowing red. For the first time, he looked small in his uniform. The authority drained from him as surely as the signal cut from his radio. He didn't dare meet her eyes. The senior attendant bent down, scrambling to gather the torn scraps of the boarding pass she had shredded. But the gesture was empty, almost pitiful. No amount of tape could piece together the authority she had lost. Her lips moved as if to form an apology, but the words refused to come. Richard Bennett stared at the floor, his silver cufflinks suddenly gaudy, his voice absent. Laura pressed a hand to her temple, whispering, "Everyone's recording. Do you understand? Everyone." The weight of humiliation pressed against them like the press of cabin air, impossible to escape. Meanwhile, Mia stood straighter than she had all night. Her hands still trembled, but her voice carried when she spoke. "I'll testify if needed. I saw everything." Her eyes met the CEO's again, and this time she didn't look away. The CEO gave her a single nod, small but powerful. It was enough to steady Mia's breathing, enough to remind the cabin that dignity was contagious. One passenger in row 3, who had been silent until now, finally raised his voice. "She never shouted once, and she still has more control than all of you combined." His words sparked murmurs of agreement. The senior attendant tried once more, desperation breaking through. "This isn't final. The company—" But her voice cracked when the CEO lifted her phone again. Carla's crisp reply came through instantly, filling the cabin with authority that couldn't be faked. "Termination processed. Accounts closed. Incident logged for legal review." The attendant staggered back as though struck. The truth was inarguable now. Passengers leaned into their cameras, narrating in disbelief. "She just fired the crew. Mid-flight. I can't believe I'm watching this." Another whispered, "No, I can believe it. Look at her. She's the only one who hasn't lost control." The CEO remained seated, calm in the storm she had dismantled. Her silence now wasn't waiting, it was triumph. Every ounce of false power had been stripped from the room, and every witness knew exactly who had taken it. The cabin, once hostile, had transformed into a courtroom, and the verdict was already written. The passengers leaned forward in their seats, waiting. Phones hovered midair, capturing every second. The crew stood hollow, badges dead, authority dissolved. The CEO sat in silence for one long moment, letting the weight of what had happened settle over the cabin like a heavy blanket. Then she spoke, each word deliberate, her voice steady enough to anchor the entire aircraft. "You tore up a ticket. You tried to tear up my dignity, but you forgot something paper burns. Power doesn't." Her eyes swept the cabin, from the trembling attendant to the humbled Bennetts, then to Mia standing tall in the aisle. Every time someone said I didn't belong, they weren't just wrong. They were teaching me how to respond. And this, she gestured around her, calm and unshaken, is the response. Passengers nodded, murmurs of approval rising. One man whispered into his phone's mic, "She's rewriting the rules in real time." The CEO leaned back, her tone softening but no less sharp. "Justice doesn't need shouting. It doesn't need violence. It needs truth and the courage to stand in it." Her gaze held the trainee's eyes for a beat longer. And sometimes it only takes one witness willing to speak. Mia's face flushed, but she didn't look away. The passengers clapped again, stronger this time, the sound rolling through the cabin like thunder after a storm. The CEO gathered her phone, slid it back into her bag, and clasped her hands together. "I don't need to record this," she said evenly, her voice carrying to the last row. "Because I am the record, the result you can't delete." The words struck deeper than any order she had given. They were not for the crew, they were for the witnesses, for the passengers who would carry this story off the plane into the world. Silence followed, but this silence was different. It wasn't tense. It wasn't fearful. It was reverent. The guard lowered his eyes. The senior attendant sank into the jump seat, her authority extinguished. Richard and Laura Bennett shrank into their corner, invisible now in a cabin that no longer bowed to them. The CEO adjusted her seatbelt, calm as ever, ready for takeoff. She didn't look at the cameras, but every lens stayed locked on her, because in that moment, the truth was undeniable. Power doesn't shout. It sits. It waits. And when tested, it speaks for itself. The storm had ended, and the sky, quiet, infinite, was hers again.